You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. If you're a dove hunter in Mississippi, did you know that we have a dove population that lives here year-round, resident doves, and we have others that migrate in and out? You're going to learn things like that and more from our guest today on the show. He is Houston Havens, Waterfowl Program Coordinator here at MDWFP.
This episode of the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast is brought to you by the Foundation for Mississippi Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks.
You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. What about migratory birds in Mississippi? When they come in, when they come out, which ones, and when you can hunt and where? Let's talk to an expert here on the show today about that on migratory birds and waterfowl here in Mississippi. He is Mr. Houston Havens on the show today. Houston, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks.
So, I mean, that's a big, broad topic, migratory birds, but here we are right now. We're in the smack middle, or fixing to be in the smack middle of dove season, and that's included in the migratory bird realm in Mississippi.
It is. Mississippi has a resident dove population, which a lot of people don't realize. Those are most of the birds that are being harvested in the early part of the season. But yeah, migratory game birds includes a wide suite of species. We've got doves and waterfowl, of course. Those are the more popular ones. And then some lesser known game birds like snipe and woodcock and rails, things like that.
That's really good. Okay. So there's something we're learning right away is early part of the dove season, it's the resident population.
It is.
The dove population that's here all year.
Pretty much, yeah. And of course, you know, we generally have a 90-day dove season, so that's a long time, lasts on into toward the end of January. And we will certainly get migratory doves that enter the state as the season progresses and as winter moves along.
How many? Like what?
We don't really have a good estimate on that. Doves would be really difficult to survey in that regard as far as number of birds in the state. But we do. We have a banding program that goes on actually this time of year, starting to wrap things up, trying to get all of our banding data in before the hunting season begins. But that's one of the ways that we track dove populations and harvest rates is by banding a sample of the population, releasing those birds to the wild, and then people harvest them and report those numbers back.
So the migratory population of doves, whatever that is, that comes in a little later, where do they come from?
All over, you know, from the Midwest. It's, you know, we think about doves just being here year round because they are in Mississippi, but, you know, northern states, Iowa, down through the Midwest will actually lose most of their resident doves, and then they'll go back in the spring, just like, you know, migratory waterfowl do. A lot of people don't really think about doves doing that, but It's pretty neat to see some of those band returns that we get from other states, you know, from our birds that follow migratory birds back to where they came from, essentially.
Yeah. You know, it's just interesting because I think like on a surface level, most of us out here, you know, John Q. Public, we hear migratory birds, you know, we think ducks or whatever.
Sure.
We don't think doves.
Right.
But that's obviously included.
It is. Yeah. And it's, you know, the banding is really one of the more interesting parts of my job, just being able to see that information, to be able to not really follow those birds, but anytime we get reports back from any birds that we banded in the state, that information comes in. And of course, a lot of them are harvested in Mississippi, as you would expect. But as birds make it 2-3 seasons out, which is pretty old for a dove, you know, we get some pretty interesting band returns on different locations on those.
Okay. And so for those that may not be familiar, the banding program, you've touched on that a couple of times. Yep. What's kind of involved with that? What are the details?
Sure. So it's nothing real flashy to it. It's clearing out a site of bare ground, essentially. And we do this in July and August for the most part for doves. Putting a little bit of grain on the ground and using a wire funnel trap, walk-in trap. We try to get birds on the bait site before we put the trap over it. So we'll usually lay a trap next to the bait, let birds feed freely and leave and kind of get used to it. And then when we're ready to trap, we'll put the trap over the bait. Birds will walk into these funnels and can't really figure out how to walk out. So not a whole lot to tricking a dove. You just got to be in a really good spot. Not all spots are great. We have some folks that do really well and band hundreds of doves in a summer. And then people like me that you know, catch a few here and there. But the banding part is an aluminum leg band that we crimp over a leg. So it's a leg band on the dove. Of course, take some data on the age and sex of the bird, the band number. Each band has a unique number on it. And then if a hunter is fortunate enough to harvest a banded dove, they can report that number online. And get an email right back with cool information about where and when it was banded, how old the bird may be. We don't really know the age of migratory birds as far as years, like deer. We can estimate deer age pretty well with the jawbones, but we know if it was a hatch year bird when it was caught and banded, or if it was an after hatch year.
Okay. And from your standpoint, from a management standpoint, why is that information valuable?
Yeah, it's really good information for harvest rates because, you asked about how many doves. We don't really have a way to survey and count numbers of doves. And so we have information on that marked sample of the population, that banded sample that's released. And so we know how many bands are out there, put out there every year. And then we get those returns when hunters harvest those birds and report them. So it's really important for hunters to report those bands when they do harvest a banded bird of any kind. And it's kind of a trophy thing for them as well. It's kind of a unique thing to kind of brag about if you're, fortunate enough to harvest a bird that has a band on it.
Sure. Now, and your job title with MDWFP is Waterfowl Program Manager.
That's right.
And so obviously dove, not waterfowl,
sure,
but the migratory part falls under that for
That's
you.
right. It includes migratory game birds. Waterfowl is our primary responsibility. It's I guess the most popular as far as a hunting standpoint in a southeastern state like ours. And so that's what we deal with for the most part on a day-to-day basis. There's more work involved with that and managing public lands for waterfowl, but dove hunting is very popular early September for sure in Mississippi.
No doubt. It's interesting how all these years I've always been in the football world, and played football in college, and I'd always hear, man, if dove season opened on the opening day of football, it would affect your football crowd. Now, and I guess this year there's no excuse for the football fan, right?
That's right. Opens the day, excuse me, our opening day is the day after most college football getting started. So no conflicts there, no excuses like you said.
Yeah, I've been saying on the radio to people that listen to us, you don't have an excuse either to go to church. Okay, 30 minutes before sunup on Sunday, it's going to open. Feel free to go to worship service in your camo. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's right. Yep. If you got a good spot close by, you can run out and have a quick hunt and then make it to church and then go back in the afternoon.
That's right. Okay, so you use the term habitat management from a waterfowl perspective. Yep. That's a big part of the dove hunting world too, and where the hunts are taken is the habitat management. Sure. Do people work with you, get your advice, ask questions?
They do. And it's kind of two really active periods as far as those questions go. So a lot of the well planned out dove fields are planted crops that are grown to maturity and then managed for dove hunting this time of year, late summer, early fall. And so that would be sunflowers, corn, things that are planted in the springtime. And so we'll get a lot of questions about that in the springtime about, what's the planting rate, planting dates, how should I arrange the crops, all of those details. And then as we move on, getting into summer and people are kind of either getting ready to manage those crops that they grew all summer, or if they're, just thinking about it at the last minute, I need to prepare a dove field, kind of deal. We can give advice on that as well and just talk about the arrangement, kind of areas that may be better suited for what they're trying to do and get set up.
This is, I have a hard time remembering things from last week, much less 20 years ago, but about 20 years ago, I want to say it's been that long. I did a news story for a TV station I was working for back then about a public, I believe it was maybe a WMA sunflower field that was, a part of MDWFP and state-owned land, and preparing it and planting it with sunflowers to have a dove season over.
Right. Yeah, a lot of work goes into preparing a sunflower field. It's, it's not just planted and then come back, when it's ready. And so we've got WMA staff that work really hard on a lot of our areas that have enough open ground to be able to do that. We do typically try to manage sunflower fields. This year was a really difficult year for multiple reasons. Things were wet in the spring, and planting dates were affected. Deer issues. Deer love to eat sunflowers when they're actively growing, and so lots of issues with those things. But yeah, it is a really good crop to be able to manage for doves if you can pull it off.
Yeah, great spot for senior photos and baby pictures too.
That's right. Yep. There's a lot of utility on a sunflower field before it gets to that dried and mature stage for doves.
Yeah, it is. Why do you think dove hunting is so popular in Mississippi?
I think it's kind of a combination of things, but it's one of the earliest hunting opportunities of the season, just kind of that season kickoff.
Right.
And then, like you mentioned, college football. I mean, it's just the social aspect of dove hunting.
Yeah.
I'm a waterfowl biologist, love to duck hunt, and you can be really social on a duck hunt, but not like dove hunting. I mean, doves they're not really, worried about a lot of noise on a field or anything. And so you can take little kids out there and, as long as it's not too hot, they can enjoy, and be loud and not really have to sit there and be quiet or anything. And so the social aspect of that and just the first opportunity for people to get out is probably has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the data that we see from our hunter surveys is that most people are hunting less than 4 days per dove season.
Mm-hmm.
And so really what we find is it's that first 2 weekends. Generally, Mississippi is going to open the Labor Day weekend, and then that following weekend, a lot of people will dove hunt, and then it really drops off after that. And I really do think it is because of that, just kind of first opportunity to get out and hunt.
Yeah. So that first week every year after it opens around Labor Day, at the dove field, there's a little trash talk that goes on about who won or lost their football games.
Sure.
Then there's also a little bit of fun among the hunters and trash talk about who's shooting the most shells
right,
to get their limit versus who doesn't,
That's
who's
right.
a better shot. You get a little bit of that going on. It really is kind of it opens the season, but a very social thing.
It is. I think about, a lot of dove fields are set up with a tree line and people are kind of lined up and down the tree line. And, it's kind of hard to hide a miss because everybody saw that bird that was coming towards you, and they're maybe telling you to get ready, and it puts a lot to pressure on you. So it's really fun to kind of rib each other and enjoy the social aspect.
What do people need to hunt and to go to dove hunt in Mississippi?
So legally, people are going to need a valid hunting license unless they're exempt from having to have a hunting license. And they're also going to need the Harvest Information Program certification, or we call it HIP. If people are not familiar with what HIP is, it's just the questions that you're asked when you go to buy a hunting or fishing license. Did you hunt migratory birds last year? And it kind of gets into some survey questions there. And so those are the things that a hunter needs to have on them when they're dove hunting. And then also shotguns that don't hold more than 3 shells or are not capable of holding more than 3 shells is a big thing.
You got to have the plug in.
That's right. Need to have a plug shotgun if it's a semi-auto. And, people may not think about that if they hunted, squirrels into January or February and then put the gun up and then just getting it out to go to the dove field. So need to check that as well. So as far as equipment though, as a waterfowl hunter, I'm not super into the gadgets, but I have probably more than is necessary for duck hunting. And dove hunting is really not like that at all. A shotgun and a shade tree, maybe, and a comfortable place to sit, and you're pretty much ready to go.
Yeah. Now, I started a minute ago to introduce you as being from the Delta, but are you? I mean, Carroll County.
It has some Delta in it, but
okay.
I'm not from. I'm from the hills. Hills of Carroll County.
The hills of Carroll County. Yeah. And so you're close to the Delta. You're right on the edge.
And a lot of, being a waterfowl biologist, a lot of our work is in the Delta. And so we spend most of our time when we're traveling, it's going to be in the Delta.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, maybe from a dove perspective, dove hunts at places in the Delta, the sure enough Delta versus in the hills or in Northeast Mississippi where I live, timber, tree lines, fields are different. I guess it's really different depending on where you are.
It is. Yeah, you're right. So in the Mississippi Delta, a lot of crops are harvested earlier than the rest of the state. And so you've got a lot of early corn that's already been harvested by the time dove season rolls in. And so those can be, wide open places. But if you can find a spot that's got a lot of birds in it, those can be really good places.
Sure.
Versus, like you said, the rest of the Mississippi up in the hills where the ag fields are smaller, maybe irregularly shaped with a lot of tree lines. Those can be great just from a shade and a hunter hiding perspective, but a little bit different as far as just the landscape around them.
Yeah. In terms of numbers and, I know like in the deer program and other things, there are ways for hunters to kind of report and give you guys the information that you need to.
Sure.
Same thing from a dove standpoint?
A little bit. So we do a survey after hunting season's end every year that kind of covers the suite of game species in Mississippi. And so we get our dove hunter information from that. Typically what we see is about 60 to 70,000 dove hunters active in the state of Mississippi every year, and harvest is somewhere around 1 million birds. So really, really important activity, that a lot of people take part in.
Yeah, really cool. And okay, so then on to a few of the others, the migratory bird seasons that we also have in other parts of the year in the state of Mississippi. I know it's a wide range, but walk us through some of that.
It is, yeah. So Canada goose season, the early Canada goose season at least, is September 1st through the 30th most years. And so that's a good opportunity. We try to encourage hunters to take advantage of that opportunity because we get a lot of calls about Canada geese throughout the rest of the year, just, on golf courses, things like that, neighborhoods, causing issues, damage to flower beds and lawns, all that sort of thing. And so this is really what this early season is geared toward, is managing the number of resident Canada geese that we have in the state. And so,
and that's from when to when?
September 1st through the 30th. And so it lines up with dove season. People can, maybe if they're on a dove field and they hear some geese, on a farm pond, something like that, be able to kind of switch out your ammo, of course, and go after those opportunities as well.
Houston, what's the best way to cook Canada goose? Because I've always heard that they're really oily,
gamey.
And gamey. Right. I had someone the other day tell me that they make sausage out of it, and I never even heard that.
Yeah. So we get a lot of questions about how to prepare game birds in particular, but especially geese, things like Canada geese and snow geese. The thing about Canada geese is they're really good at surviving, and so it may be a really, really old bird that's being harvested, and you don't really know that unless you're, looking at the fine details of the feathers. But generally, making sausage out of things, marinating for a long time, getting the blood out of the breast meat, or, putting in a smoker, things like that. Just some kind of slow cooking method is generally the way that we recommend, people to use those really large birds. You get a lot of meat off of them, and so you definitely want to be able to use those.
Yeah. On the dove side, I've eaten a lot of dove and I love it. Fried. I've had some that's fried in a skillet, just the same way you would chicken.
Yeah.
But I always compared the taste to chicken liver. You agree with that? Disagree?
A little bit for doves. Doves are one of my favorite game birds to eat, or game animals particularly. I like them fried. I like them, wrapped in bacon and thrown on the grill as well.
Yeah.
But waterfowl in particular, or people really have that connotation of tasting like liver. And what we find is, and I've had some that definitely had a liver taste to them. What we find is it's really when they've been overcooked.
Okay.
So it's pretty unforgiving. Wild game in general is pretty unforgiving. You got to cook it just right. If you cook it, you definitely don't want it too rare. But if you're cooking it too much, then you're getting really dry and tough. And with waterfowl, it's going to have that liver flavor to it.
And and I'm a good Southern boy. You fry it, batter it, and fry it, and cook it. I'll eat it.
Sure.
And I'll probably enjoy it.
That's right.
I've had that. So you got the September Canada goose season, but that's not all in September.
That's not all. We've got September teal season, which is the small species of ducks that's starting to pass through, and really in late August, but through the month of September they'll be passing through and making their way through Mississippi on down to the Gulf Coast, and even into Central and South America by the time winter rolls around. And so there is a special 16-day season on them. Don't have as many people pursuing the early Canada goose and teal season as we do during the regular duck season. Probably because of the snakes and mosquitoes and everything else that you'll deal with in Mississippi in September. But there are a lot of people that are interested in it. We have some wildlife management areas that have good habitat and usually have pretty good hunts on those birds as well.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask for you personally too. You grew up in Mississippi. You're from west over in Carroll County, Mississippi. For you and your career path and looking over the span of your life, and now you're in this position now with MDWFP, it's got to be a really cool thing to be where you are in the position you're in, involved with something that you love participating in so much yourself in your home state. It's a pretty cool thing for you.
I tell people I got the best job in the world. Never know from day to day, what you're going to be doing. It's not the same thing every day for sure. And getting to work with people who are hunting, fishing, private landowners, getting to interact with them and see some really nice properties and things that they're doing, or, that they have been doing, or maybe issues that they need help with to work through is a really rewarding part of the job. But yeah, I grew up hunting and fishing. For most of my, childhood and into high school, didn't know what a wildlife biologist was. I thought I was going to be a veterinarian, because I just knew that I, had a love for animals and thought that would be a good thing to do. And then as I met some people who were in the field working for this agency and thought, man, that's a really cool job. I need to learn more about that. Ended up going to Mississippi State and getting my degree there and been here ever since.
Yeah. It's interesting, Houston, of the people that we've talked to that have sat in the chair that you're in, so many who are, employees here at the agency at MDWFP, they had an aha moment somewhere along the way, whether it was in the 6th grade or the 9th grade or a senior year of college. And it's usually have a love for the outdoors, ran into somebody who was a biologist or a conservation officer and went, wait a minute. I can do that for a living.
Right.
Like my whole life I can do. And then off you go. It sounds like you were similar.
Absolutely. Yep. I, like most, just growing up, just liking to get outside and spend time outside and hunt and fish. But yeah, having that moment of, okay, there's a profession where I can, work to conserve and manage these resources that I've been enjoying for years is a really cool thing.
Yeah. Okay. So, pop quiz, you can only go on one hunt.
Yeah.
What's it going to be?
Man, people are gonna expect me to say waterfowl, and so I would probably pick a duck hunt, maybe in the prairies. I've never been up to the Dakotas or into Canada and hunted in the prairies, and would love to do that and plan to do that sometime in my life to experience that. But I would have to say turkey hunting is going to be pretty close behind there. I really enjoy turkey hunting. Totally different times of year, so they don't conflict with each other, and so that's a benefit to me.
Yeah. Okay. From a conservation standpoint, just a second ago when you were talking about, realizing at some point, hey, I can be involved in helping to manage this resource that I love to take part in myself. Mm-hmm. So managing the resource is sort of the guts of the job.
Yep.
What's your message to the hunters and their role that they play in the conservation effort and in managing the resource?
Yeah, that's a great question. As a state wildlife agency, the things that we're able to do for management, whether it's on public lands or just anything that we do, having biologists to begin with to go work with private landowners is based a lot on license sales. And so just, of course, promoting the sale of hunting licenses, fishing licenses that run our agency, but also getting out with those hunters or those landowners, doing youth events, talking about, this is fun, but here's why we have bag limits and seasons. Here's why we manage habitat. It's a full-time job. If you're really intensively managing especially for a suite of species on a property, it's not just showing up for hunting season and going out and harvesting game animals. It's managing natural habitats, maybe doing some plantings to set things up, and so there's a lot that goes into it. And just explaining that it's more than just going out and taking. You've got to keep managing. You've got to keep taking care of these resources so we can continue to enjoy them.
Yeah, and I guess that communication process too of reporting.
Sure.
When the surveys come out, taking part and being involved in it.
Right. Yeah. It's really important for us to know, what's being harvested, what people are enjoying or don't like, getting that public feedback. Doesn't mean that we can always make those changes, but we're, definitely willing to hear that feedback because we want people to continue to enjoy the outdoors. And so we want to do as best we can, as long as it's within the responsible management of the resources.
Yeah. Okay. And so I think I interrupted you a minute ago, which I'm bad about doing, but So we go back, we got doves in September, the Canada goose season during the month of September, teal. Once we get past the September stuff, then what's kind of next on the calendar looking forward?
Yeah, so we'll get into regular waterfowl seasons, your primary duck and goose seasons that are going to open usually around Thanksgiving weekend. The way the calendar fell this year, it is a Thanksgiving opener for 2024. But those are really when things start to open up. People are really excited about opening day of duck season. last year and the way this year is setting up as far as water on the landscape is going to be, it looks like another pretty tough year unless we get some systems to move in and really dump a lot of rainfall across the state. But I need to back up and not forget some of the lesser known game birds.
Okay.
In September we have rail and gallinule seasons that are going to be open. I've met very few rail hunters or gallinule hunters in the state of Mississippi, but I know there are a few out there. They are kind of what we call in the category of secretive marsh birds, and so not really spending a lot of time out in the open. I know, you're a bass fisherman, right?
Yes.
And so getting out, especially on Ross Barnett Reservoir, you might see some of these birds walking around on lotus or lily pads. A lot of those are going to be in the rail family there. But
what do they look like, Houston?
Well, it depends on the species. Rails are not really very colorful birds, really kind of a drab because they're trying to blend into the grass. Right. Long-legged, kind of awkward-looking, upright birds. But then you have the purple gallinule, which is also in the rail family. It kind of looks like a tropical bird or a parrot or something like that. Really, really bright purple plumage during this time of year. Really stands out if you've never seen one before when it comes walking out of some cattails onto some lotus leaves. But not a lot of people pursuing them, but they will, if they're out Canada goose hunting or teal hunting in September, and if they know what the birds are, they will kind of harvest those opportunistically.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned this a bit ago too, but September, in Mississippi, it's an interesting month. We might get a day or two or three where we get that false fall feel and the humidity goes away, but it's going to be 97 degrees and humid and throughout the month of September. That's so right. It's hard to cover up and then go out and sit still.
That's right.
It's hard to do that.
Yeah. You definitely want to try to catch those really cool mornings, especially dove hunting. And speaking of those cool fronts and weather patterns, those can move doves. They are migratory birds and they'll respond to those weather changes. We'll get calls from people every year leading up to the dove season. They'll say, hey, we had a lot of birds on our field, and next morning, we went out to look and they were just gone. And we suspect that it is weather patterns, cool fronts coming in and birds just, feel like they've got to move. Sometimes it can be landscape changes around you. Maybe somebody down the road harvested a field and birds responded to that new food resources. So a lot of things play into it. It's not just as simple as they're just going to be here because they're always here kind of a deal.
Yeah. And I guess I hadn't thought about this earlier. We were talking about what you can do and what people do to, manage the habitat. There's a few things you can't do when it comes to dove hunting, which are always discussed.
Yeah, so leading up, the few days before, a week or so before dove season, we get those last-minute calls to the office about, it's typically about wheat, planting wheat. And so what we usually recommend is for people to just go about it like they are actually planting like a deer food plot or planting wheat in an area, preparing the ground with a disc or scratching the ground. Mm-hmm. And so you've got soil contact for that seed. And then evenly distributing the seed across the ground. Mississippi State Extension Service has a lot of good information on planting wheat, and that's what federal regulations actually defer to is the State Extension Service. And so about 90 pounds per acre, evenly distributed across the field is a good, safe way to do that. People get into issues with doing that a couple of weeks before the season, and if you get a rain shower that sprouts that wheat, they want to go back and have that fresh grain on top of the ground and plant it again, and that's when they get into the legality issues.
Right.
And also, having grain piled up in places across the field, we really just try to tell people to focus on making a legitimate planting of wheat, and then you'll have no issues.
Right. Waterfowl Program Coordinator. I think about like in football, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. There's a lot under that title. It's one offensive coordinator. He's got to know offensive linemen, quarterback, receivers, the whole thing. Waterfowl Program Coordinator. There's a lot that falls up under that for you.
There is, and it changes by the seasons. One of the hardest questions for me to answer is, what do you do, for your job? And I always have to start by, it depends on what time of year it is. And so, this time of year, we're still in the growing season in Mississippi, and so we're still doing public land visits with our WMA staff, looking at areas that are going to be flooded later this winter and have public hunts on those, getting those prepared. And we do a lot of private land technical guidance, what we call it, just getting a call from the landowner, hey, we need to set up a time to come out and take a look at a property. And so that's a really, really enjoyable part of the job, just seeing all these really nice properties and being able to help them with issues that they may be having with habitat management. And then as we get into the fall and winter, as migratory birds start to enter the state, then we're, managing hunts on wildlife management areas and doing aerial waterfowl surveys, getting up in an airplane and spending a lot of time counting birds across the Mississippi Delta. And so that's a really interesting part of the job as well.
I bet. I knew you were going to say you enjoyed getting to work with those private landowners. You kind of see the different areas and advise and get reports that it's going well. Flying around an airplane, getting a survey, pretty cool part of the job too.
It is a cool part of it. And I'll be honest about it. I tell people I enjoy it for the first day or two, and then it really gets to be a job after that. It's a lot of time in an airplane. You got to have the right weather to be able to do it. But yeah, I mean, it gives you a different perspective of the landscape. Seeing a lot of things that you don't really just pick up on or really notice just driving around and looking around.
Really cool. Houston, great to talk to you. Thanks for being on the show, and we'll do this again soon.
Thank you.
He is Houston Havens, Waterfowl Program Coordinator at Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Thanks for listening to the show. We'll see you outdoors.